And heated conversation has been going on, and Victor Bure wanted to give a comment here and then leave, but I won't let you leave. You will not withdraw from this conversation. We will continue.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes.
One of the things, this largely is a media debate, largely as a press pass. I mean, and that's what I was, what I'm going to say. That one, the challenges we are facing so far, and what the 2 days or even by March, the many by-elections, is that there's serious need for media houses to invest in research. In many of these analysis you are talking about, is that we only have the NASA Jubilee positions. We are never told the constitutional position. What is the legal position? I say. So how many of our media houses are, for example, today now, a few days too, we have now editorial, page 1 commentaries, where now media feels they are making a position on something. Where have they been? I mean, we would have expected some of these positions to come earlier. 2, we are also allowing, especially these so many live debates, every Tom Harandik to be an expert on everything. And for that reason, we have too many experts using a lot of words to say very few things about nothing. And you finish a program and you have not gotten even what was the discussion. So we seriously need our media houses to have partnerships and invest in having people who can help Kenyans make sense out of the too many things that are happening. So that is something that we need to. The issue of bedded journalists, not even, we are moved away from embedded, now we are bedded journalists. And once that happens, it has seriously affected the quality of the content we are getting out there. That I'm doing already a story, or I'm covering as already somebody who is already sympathetic to a certain cause. We need to revisit that matter. that how do we deploy our journalists to cover events? Is it determined by tribe? Is it determined by who? And that challenge we are having is hugely. We have now journalists or correspondents who are more informed, more connected than the editors, so that their stories pass without being edited. Just say, that has come from so-and-so of our colleague at NASA. Yes. Now, who else? You know, we need more people empowered in our newsrooms, not just one person, so that is Victor who writes about NASA only. And that's it, because that is affecting the quality of what we are doing. Then the issue of live coverage. Again, this is an issue that media houses, while the law allows, and many of us are going, but we are sending people on live coverage who are less informed on matters they are purporting to be commenting on. And very simple, small events we want to do live coverages. And that has affected big time, again, the quality of the content that is coming from most of our media houses. And we now have a situation where people just endorse statements. And that's supposed to be a journalist to be hosting a serious debate and coming. So that again is purely an internal issue that journalists need and media houses need to invest in. That at what level are we allowing what? So again, running away will not help. We need media houses to think seriously about research, about quality and vetting, about the issues of embedded journalists, about the issue of planted stories. You read our weekend stories largely. Stories of impeccable sources close to the source, and sometimes you wonder, is it fiction? Is it stories? Very simple, common. So again, media houses, we must invest in that if we are going to help Kenyans make sense out of the too many things that are happening in the country.
Italy.
I want to say this. As a trained journalist, what I learned when I was training, and my senior here can attest to this, tenacity is very important. You must, as a journalist, when you go to cover a function or an event, you must understand what the news source is saying. Don't quote or report what you are told after that particular event. Because what you are seeing today is a journalism that thrives on after news events. Like on the side shows, you go to the sidelines of that event, you talk to somebody, then he gives you a story that is so much different from what was said in that particular event. Then that's what that particular journalist carries because of the brown envelope syndrome. Not going back to that. Another thing, democracies succeed or fail based on their journalism. If a journalism is not up to the task, then the democracy of that country will fail. So what am I trying to say? When Mr. Chebukati said and considered that he cannot guarantee to preside over a free and fair repeat presidential election, nobody, and without batting my eyes, I'll repeat it, no journalist has gone back to him to ask, why did you say this? What is it that is hurting you? Of course, he said some of his motions have been shot down by a few commissioners. Wait a minute.
As a trained journalist, do you honestly think he would actually give you that interview right now and tell you?
Let me say this. That one that was done by maybe one journalist in the newspaper. But I'm talking about what people watch. You know, a lot of people watch television, listen to radios.
The issue of the we are captured by five TVs. If something has not appeared on the 5 TVs, then it has not been
now,
media.
What am I saying? The chair said some of these motions have been defeated by some commissioners. And these commissioners, we know which side of the political divide they listen to.
Do we?
And I will say where Mr. Eric's Ngeno sits, they have some sort of remote control of those particular guys, including the CEO, who has said, and who was said to have taken a 3 weeks leave to necessitate a free and fair
Those are strong allegations you're making.
And today,
can you substantiate?
as we speak, today he was in the office. What is he still doing in the office? If indeed he is on leave. If indeed he's on leave, what did he go to do at the anniversary towers? Another thing, we are not very keen on what is going to happen on the 26th. Actually, from our side, where I sit, we don't care what is going to happen. But what we know...
But that's a heavy statement. I mean, if you have many followers and you're saying you don't care what will happen on the 26th.
There will be no election according to our resolve, because the issues that were raised to the IBC by NASA leadership have not been addressed. So many issues. So many issues. We did not call for Mr. Chiloba to go on leave. NASA demanded Mr. Chiloba to exit IBC completely, including other officers, including Madam Immaculate Kasait. There are other officers in that commission
I don't know, Philip.
Who are alleged, I'm saying who are alleged to have been involved in the shambolic presidential election.
I do not know where this delusion came, where you start thinking that this coming event is a function of NASA directives or dictates. It's a function of the Constitution and the Supreme Court order.
But it must be
it didn't give any conditions on anyone leaving.
With the existing laws as they.
But which law says Chiloba must leave? Which law says Kasait must leave? Which law says that NASA must be indulged and that they must just keep coming up with a shopping list of whims and so on and so forth? Remember this, as you speak,
but what I'm trying to say
as you speak,
there are issues that you have raised.
As you speak, there's a commissioner you people have lionized.
All right, just make your point.
There's a commissioner you people at NASA have lionized immensely, Rosalie Nakombe. She actually did say, she's on record as saying that election of 8th of August reflected the people's will and that President Uhuru Kenyatta won.
She said that was under duress.
But the media hasn't amplified sufficiently and NASA hasn't responded to it. Raila Odinga, up to today in a rally somewhere, said that while Akombe was still serving in the commission, they were in constant communication every day and he was giving her directives on what to do, how to sneak around airports and so on and so forth. That obviously is very improper, thoroughly improper, regardless of, it's just thoroughly improper. So that is why when you speak about remotely controlling commissioners, perhaps you are assuming, the way people say that you hacked to see whether Jubilee have hacked, you're assuming that because some people you may be able to remotely control, that other people are also able to remotely control other people. Then there's a question of embedded journalism. All democracies have journalists that are embedded with political campaigns and politicians and so on and so forth. The idea is that they are going to maintain their professional distance and skepticism and maybe come up with a very contextually rich and nuanced coverage of campaigns. That is the whole principle behind it. And most of these people end up writing very serious blockbusters, eye-opening, where they give you perspectives that you do not know.
Do you see that in our Kenyan?
Are you talking about that reality?
The challenge that we have, probably we will start somewhere, but the challenge that we have right now is that we have broad spectrum capacity problem in the media. For instance, I will speak because I'm a lawyer about court reporting. Anybody who is not a lawyer who followed what was going on in court through media suffered immensely. We just suffered thoroughly because, and we can't blame anyone here, most media houses haven't bothered to form liaisons with the legal community, and we haven't developed our court reporters to be able to even understand simple things like enjoin and join to a cause, who is a respondent, who is a petitioner. I mean,
your point being we need
by the time things like the minimum stand up, we were completely flummoxed. No, so there's a capacity constraint, and it's become a refrain. Every time we come to press pass, we say we don't develop people to be able to research, we don't develop people to be able to report technical issues, medicine.
He's made that point.
We have very refined court reporters in this country.
Yes.
I can tell you for free. But the challenge is, once now that was a big event, we brought in the parachute journalists. Now, the people who have been reporting consistently on court matters were thrown off. And we bring in people who now have to grapple with those things.
Dorothy, your point.
I can, before perhaps she goes through, one thing that is clear, and we need to follow this discussion, I think it would be amiss for us not to rebut what Ngeno is saying, that the propaganda that came from Jubilee, that former Commissioner Akombe was in continuous communication with Senator Orengo or with Raila, was propaganda. And we need to be able to take it to where it belongs. So that Ngeno, if he is a professional, must be able to speak to facts, as opposed to the propaganda machine that, yes, his party is entitled to perpetuate, but not to make it seem like it's truth. Because which airports was she trying to maneuver? Rosalind left the country once. She was stopped in the airport. And it is after a proper process through the administration that she was allowed to travel, after they found that she was on an official mission. The second time she left was purely on another official mission, as she was going to check on the printing in Dubai. So to say that she was in constant communication with the opposition to avoid airports is propaganda and simplistic,
and should be called out,
and it must be called for what it is.
All right.
But two, that yes, Victor has already acknowledged an issue of research, and I would tell you that the Supreme Court decision baffled lawyers, it baffled medics, it baffled everybody else in the country. That's why a section of politicians even haven't accepted that the decision was made. So the whole country was going through a process of learning, because it is Austria, it's Ukraine, where a nullification of presidential election had happened. There isn't anybody
unprecedented here.
Yeah, who can say I had the repository of knowledge and I could be relied upon. Yes, the media fell short of indulging people who could bring in proper analysis, because we had a number of us who were just talking heads that were highly partisan. And that must be known, that sometimes you have medics who are partisan, you have lawyers who are partisan, and you have politicians who are partisan. So when we bring people not from the point of depth of knowledge, but the partisanship, the whole country is captured. And we miss out proper debates because we go to razzmatazz and hoopla, as it were, as opposed to focusing on
But the mere fact that people can see it as partisanship is because the audience, and I keep saying this, is not just dormant. People are not stupid. The viewer is not stupid, and they can actually inform us. So even if we bring partisan people, Italia will say his piece, Ngeno will say his piece, but the Kenyan will make a decision for his own self.
Philip has direct. Can I say something? I think that in as much as there's that partisanship that Mark is talking about, and which has come out very clearly during this panel, what has happened today really points to a situation that should make us sit back and ask if the narrative that it is NASA which is sabotaging the general election can really hold. When trade unions and civil society come out and call for a postponement of an election because they think the environment is not conducive to a free and fair election, and those trade unions and civil society are of mixed ethnicity, because I know that the political environment in Kenya is highly ethnicized, then we should actually pause and ask ourselves whether there might not be a point, to listen to. I know that Eric is going to say that it was 60 days. They were given the
Gospel according to 60 days.
The Supreme Court gave 60 days.
According to the rule of law.
But the Supreme Court, as we have said already in this program, also gave conditionalities. It said that those issues that made it nullify the election have to be fixed. If Eric can tell the viewers that each and every issue has been fixed, then we are ready to go. I'm a voter, and
number one,
I'll go and vote.
Number one.
Make your point quick.
Number one, people are not ready or not ready. We are either ready or not ready, depending on some people who are saying that we're not ready for an election. If Baba tomorrow stands up and says we are ready, those people will be ready. So it has nothing to do with conditions and environment for free and fair elections. It has everything to do with what Raila Odinga has told his followers. If tomorrow morning he wakes up and says we are voting, those people will be voting on 26th.
But isn't that the case? Then you'd say, Jubilee maintaining that there's going to be an election.
Like you said, Mark, the people are not stupid. And Philip, in one of his very colorful escapades, when he's trying to manufacture news, I remember there was a raid on Sifa Towers that became a challenge. Kenyans saw through it completely, where Philip said that some people came and turned over a few things in the office, and basically they were trying to sell a story which it didn't fly completely. But you understand that is the level to which sometimes we try to push a partisan agenda, create tensions, create imaginary crises, manufacture basically a story, and well, the people can see through it once in a while. Most importantly, what Dorothy I think has raised, which is a problem, a nationwide problem. In August 2010, we promulgated a constitution. All right? Our relationship with that constitution is beginning to betray us, in the sense that we haven't understood that it is supposed to be the substratum upon which the entire, it's supposed to lay the principles and institutions on which the Republic of Kenya is founded. If we still believe that the constitution is negotiable, then really no one can save us. If we believe for a moment that we can sit here in the street and say we don't feel like obeying the constitution today, so therefore let us sit down under a tree and negotiate something else, then we are in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of trouble.
It is on that basis that the Supreme Court nullified the election, because IEBC had behaved as if the constitution never came into
But
court.
now we are behaving as if those 60 days...
The second part is that the Supreme Court did not just talk about 60 days.
That is true.
It asked us
That is true.
to follow basic constitutional principles.
Correct.
And two, with existing laws.
Correct.
Now, there is nobody who has said overthrow the constitution and take us to the table to make a new law.
That's what we are saying.
Nobody has said that. In fact, I want to reiterate, say what the civil society have said. You and me would remember that there was a question when we will have the first elections under this constitution. The courts told us, when everybody else thought we were going to have elections in August in 2012, we ended up having elections in March in 2013. That in itself tells us the constitution as a document, we will leave its principle. Why was it possible for the courts to make that decision at that time? There were things that were being discussed about who needs to be the umpire to this process. How do we ensure that a credible body has been set up? How do we ensure that other subsidiary laws that are expected to help us have an open, free, fair election to be carried out? So for anybody to carry a narrative that anybody who begins saying, postpone these elections so that the conditions are right, is torpedoing the constitution, that person is reading those proposals narrowly, purely to suit a narrative. Because we've not been told go and do elections, any type of elections in 60 days. The elections that must be conducted in 60 days must meet the constitutional standard. Right. If they don't, as a country, we will be laughing at ourselves because we will say we failed the constitution, we failed ourselves, and we need to keep going back to this process.
No, let me now move it just a bit forward to something that happened today, and it was actually cited. This is Chebukati's supposed meeting, not supposed, actually it happened, a meeting with the president at Harambee House, and you know, Gadara makes a comment here about this. The problem with Kenya media is regurgitating PSCU offerings. Uhuru Kenyatta met Chebukati, only one of them spoke. Let's listen into what the State House spokesperson had to say about this particular meeting. We didn't quite get a lot from what happened inside. Let's listen in.
We can confirm that a meeting has taken place between the President and the Chair of the IEBC. The President has reiterated what he has said before, that he doesn't have any issues with the IEBC. He doesn't have any conditions or demands other than the election being held in terms of the orders given by the Supreme Court, that is within 60 days, and in this case on the 26th of October, which is a date set by the IEBC.
Underlying issue there is 60 days, yes.
Once the spokesperson, no mention of constitution, no mention of the law.
Hold on. Let Victor make a...
Once the spokesperson of the presidency or whoever gives the outcome of a closed-door meeting, should media break the glasses and go and get more? I mean, because that's what Gadara is saying, that the media just respond. But that's the president's spokesperson, and he gave a brief of what came out of the meeting.
Absolutely.
So media would have done what? Planted secret pilots.
But as we speak, Mark, since we are running clips, why don't we get? I've seen that Nation website has run what Raila spoke about today in Kisii. You will be seeing him saying that he was in constant communication with the commissioner of IEBC when he was a candidate and she was a commissioner. And I still insist that's improper. It's on record. And believe me, that will be the end. Okay, someone has done well enough to cover that aspect of it. But that will be the end of the story. We will not, it will not raise eyebrows. It will not cause any particularly high level of disapproval.
Wouldn't raise as many eyebrows as you would expect.
Constant communication with Madam Akombe, Dr. Akombe, after leaving for the US.
If you get the clip, and Raila says during.
Let's not delve on that.
Her tenure
Let's
as a
talk
commissioner.
about what the
during her
spokesperson
tenure
said.
as a commissioner.
You played that clip.
You were in Kisii today, weren't you, Philip?
Hold on, no, he wasn't.
There's a clip. There's a clip.
Your point. What's your point? Just make your point.
My point being, when Raila Odinga stands up and gives conditions under which he will deem the election to be free and fair, or otherwise he will deem it to be no election.
You see,
he is sitting as a second, as an appellate court, a supervisory jurisdiction, where he can now supervise the implementation of the Supreme Court decision.
But isn't he also standing as a whatever you call it? But isn't he standing as a representative? Yes,
he's a
an important stakeholder who's representing millions of Kenyans.
To give conditions under which a Supreme Court order should be obeyed or executed is a bit rich. It's a bit rich. I think so. It's undermining institutions. It's sabotaging IEBC's capability. It is calling into question things that we should not be calling into question.
Mark, in the morning of this program, my brother Eric said that the person that we should focus on now is the chair of the IEBC.
Thank you.
After this closed meeting, I expected the chair of the IEBC to address the media and state what they discussed in that closed meeting with the president, who is a candidate, just like any other, just like Jirong or Ekuru Aukot, because my candidate, my party leader is not a candidate. So, for the spokesperson of the presidency to come out and issue a statement on behalf of Chebukati That's preempting.
No. He
Preempting what the chair
He wasn't speaking for Chebukati.
would say. No. You know,
So
the
But
chair,
isn't he? But isn't he?
Was that a failure
Isn't
on the media or the failure on IBC
Now,
to communicate what
look,
they have
you
discussed?
see,
Would you want them? Would you want us to chase down Chebukati?
we are
or
seeing a
President
pattern
Uhuru
of
to
events.
speak? And if they're not willing to speak, it's
we are
our
seeing
fault?
a pattern of events unfolding in the run-up to the so-called repeat elections. One, there is the consistency of the U.S. ambassador and a group of diplomats from Europe and Americas issuing statements after statements. And those statements do not conform to what the IBC is propagating. Because the IBC, when Mr.
What exactly with what
when
they said
Mr.
today?
Gode
Because
goes-
they did
goes
say
to the
that the
media
election
to say,
should be carried according to the
look,
constitutional
when
dictates.
Mr. Gode goes to the media and says that the election, the IBC is ready to conduct a free and fair election. When the AU observers go to the media and say the IBC is ready to conduct a free and fair election, we have not heard that from the chair of the commission. I leave it at that. Another thing,
So are
why
you saying-
is Jubilee so much on the defense of the IBC and always attacking the Supreme Court for doing what they did and which is within their mandate? That's a question that we need to be asking, because they're not.
And haven't we asked? Haven't we asked these questions enough times?
The media has been asking
Enough times.
but that answer has never come out, because the Jubilee guys, the president goes to to a rally, attacks the Supreme Court, says as much as they made that we may not agree with it. Okay, whatever he said, but they are too much soft on the IBC and their misdeeds, as opposed to what they should be supporting, like, supporting the rule of law. And then they come up with a hashtag, system ya Wakora or Wakora network. You call a Supreme Court, which is an arm, the judiciary is an arm of government, you brand it a Wakora network. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in democracy.
You're talking about it
doesn't work.
The morality of that, and that's not on the side of media.
It's not on the side of the media.
The politicians will say what they'll say, and of course will relay what they have to say and analyze, or at least attempt to analyze the same.
We have done a media analysis of how media has covered IBC so far. We have done a media monitoring, and we have seen how, media, one of the challenges which we have seen is does IBC have a serious communication engagement strategy? So that why would such a meeting then be? Because the president's spokesperson was doing his job.
Correct.
And we can't follow him simply because IBC failed on their part. Because IBC, being their meeting, would have been the first people to give a brief of what came out of the meeting.
More critical.
Now, if they fail, and two,
more reason we should have changes in that commission.
We have consistently, and we have seen media has this time, having the lesson of 2013, have been very critical of IBC. And I have clips, I have reports looking at some of the issues we are raising have been raised. But sometimes it becomes follow-up, like you mentioned. We want to follow up. But there are too many things that are coming up to a certain level where media has 46 pages. Now, if they are going to do all the IBC and other things, they have to go 100 pages. So that's the thing. So media has done itself on IBC. But IBC also seems to be having internal challenges that we can't hold media accountable for.
Mark, just very quickly, you see what's happening over here. When you give a stakeholder a blackout on a matter of very grave public interest, what happens is that they are forced to buy. So sometimes it's strategic. When media give IBC a blackout,
IBC hasn't been given a blackout, let's be honest.
There's a lot of blackout, and the understanding was that then the government should advertise things in the media. So there's a way in which that is managed, in a way so that since you need to get your message out, you will be forced to spend money instead of it being covered as a matter of public interest. It's something that should be looked at and analyzed.
Victor,
what degree? Just one moment, just hold a second. Secondly,
honestly, right now, as media, we haven't ignored or given a blackout to the IBC.
But then the media have to tell us why they don't pick up, they don't knock at the doors of IBC, they don't ask the questions. IBC is in the public limelight right now. It's very topical. All this anxiety around the election rests in IEBC. Nobody is visiting anniversary towers sufficiently. More critically, the question of the Wakora network story is that there are petitions before the Judicial Service Commission and all sorts of court actions regarding relationships and networks and cartels and sort of funny interactions that form the context of the Supreme Court decision. That's a question for accountabilities, that's a question of transparency, that's a question of the rule of law, the institutions take their course. But the question is, there are people who feel that there is sufficient evidence to show that there were improper relationships, there was improper contact, there was improper influence, there is a way in which the decision was procured that did not meet muster. For instance, it has been suggested that even the forms that were used to nullify the election, some of them were forgeries. That's something that's worth looking at. There's a report that was prepared by the registrar of the Supreme Court that needs to be relooked at. So what we're saying is that when somebody says there were Wakora, people are saying that there are cartels that have captured the judiciary. Basically years.
Who's saying
less
this?
than 5 years.
Who is saying that? That's the question.
More than,
is that messaging? Is that part of your message?
Less than 5 years.
Is it?
The part of the message is that there are allegations out there. They have been filed in the proper fora. They will be ventilated in due course.
We'll let the courts decide.
I'm not saying there are Wakoras or no Wakoras, but that the allegations have been made. People have taken trouble and spent resources and time to go and load those allegations.
Yes, it's at the courts.
It's something that needs to be paid attention to.
All right, let that run its course.
I think we should have an interest in ensuring that our judiciary is protected from all sorts of Wakoras.
Right.
However,
after the 2013 ruling, there was nothing like Wakora network because it favored one side of the political divide. So now that it doesn't favor them, they are Wakora, which is not good. They must apologize to the judiciary, the Chief Justice, and anybody who sits in that court.
Let's now look at something that we're definitely facing. And we have to wrap it up in 10 minutes. Actually, this is way past our time. Victor says, yeah, he's really tired. And I'll start with Dorothy going down the panel. And it seems at least all systems go for the repeat election to happen. And this is going to happen if indeed it takes place on Thursday without one of the stakeholders, one of the main stakeholders. What is your prescription to the media in covering this? It hasn't happened before. How do we go about this? Because many would say that we are covering an illegitimate process, a selection, not an election.
I think the media cannot escape from covering an event that is happening. Whether it is illegitimate or not, they cannot escape from covering. It's only somebody who is partisan, and in this case, I would say NASA or Jubilee, who can accuse the media of either covering or not covering. But absolutely, the media cannot escape from covering what, we cannot bury our heads in the sand. So it will be covered whether it happens or not. If it happens, it will be covered. If it does not happen, it will be covered. That is what I know, having been in this house for so many years. Right.
Victor, I want to give you the last word, not the politicians. Okay. Well, at least Philip is a journalist, but he holds brief now for ODM Communications Department. And you say for you, as far as you're concerned, no election moving forward. So in your expectation, what do you look forward to in terms of coverage of this whole process? Even from your perspective.
Our position is simple. Since our irreducible minimums have not been addressed, there will be no election on the 26th. I'm not saying this as Philip Etale. This is what has been decided by the leadership of the National Super Alliance, NASA. It has been said over and over, and that must not be underrated. It's a strong statement. 2, the media must be conscientious in the reportage of the whole thing, whether those who are going to vote or those who are not going to vote. And they should use their discretion to decide how is the day going to be covered by the media, by us as journalists. we must be conscientious in what we're going to do. Lastly from me, and to Jubilee, you know, where we are today, Kenya is in dire need of true prophets like Elijah, who will confront King Ahab and Jezebel. That one I leave it to the men of color to interpret. And to the president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, please read Job 29 and Isaiah 1, verse 15 to 17. Even as you hold prayers for the country, you must read these two verses, these two chapters. They are very important because the country is so divided that you cannot afford to go to an election that will further divide this country and leave us in tatters. Let's have a president who will unite the country. President Kenyatta should decide whether he wants to leave a legacy that will see a dead Kenya or a live and prosperous Kenya.
Ngeno is scribbling down. I don't know if it's taking down the scriptures.
The notes, yeah, the verses.
Your expectation for the next 48 hours plus, the election is going to happen according to what Jubilee is saying and IEBC so far?
IEBC have said, they have given how the flow will happen in the polling station, how you're going to go in, get identified, and pick a ballot and finish your business and get out of there.
And NASA says there is no
every
election.
expectation that an election will take place over there. Now, what I would say is that the media should be more skeptical of NASA, much more skeptical than they are presently. Most of the crises that people are talking about right now are mainly non-existent to the extent that we've reached a point where if we have a cognitive crisis, it becomes a national crisis when we should just resolve it by finding out more information, by learning more, researching, and so on and so forth. So there was a time when constitutional crisis was all the buzz in town. There was no constitutional crisis. No one asked, what is a constitutional crisis? How is it existing under the current circumstances? But fortunately enough, it died off. In time, it died off. People realized that they're hyping things up. You hear words like controversial, you hear things like anxiety. They are manufactured to create that tension sort of thing.
You don't call a situation where you have electoral laws being pushed in Parliament, and in fact the President says that he's going to sign it into law, as well as a push to have these elections before the 31st because of avoiding that crisis. You don't see an issue?
A crisis is
in how it's been
has
reported.
more existential implications. Not just any hiccup constitutes a crisis. I think we should be less alarmist. We should be more proportionate in describing things. Crisis, of course, wants to sell, it wants to create that alarm, it wants to create the sensation. But crisis at the same time is making Kenyans panic. It's making people buy all the flour in supermarkets for no particular reason because they think there's another crisis coming up. Secondly, we must understand that regardless of how wide and large your following is, you are not the monopolist of all orthodoxy in this land. So not everything that comes out of Raila Odinga's mouth is going to be the law written in stone. There will be an election. His opinion over it is a valid opinion, but it's just one opinion among 40 million opinions in this country. The idea that all orthodoxy in this country is defined in Capitol Towers over there by Italia and his people should be very, 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 very wrong. So that the question of whether the election will be legitimate or not should not be a matter of a function of somebody else's opinion. The source of all legitimacy, the whole meaning of the word legitimacy, is our laws and our institutions. The idea that somebody can sit down and say, I'm delegitimizing this thing by just standing in a rally somewhere and say it's not legitimate. We should form a proper, functional, rational relationship with our laws and our institutions. Right now, like I still said, it's still worrying. It's still worrying. The most important thing that I think the media should do as we cover the election is to have perspective, is to be much more skeptical of Raila Odinga.
You've already said that point, yes. So I'll leave it at that. Henry, you've been in areas that have had conflict, and many people are worried, not to be doomsday prophets or anything like that. But if an election is called and on one side they say there will be no election, and then there's a heavy deployment of police, and we were accused in the first round of the elections not to have exposed the brutality against people who probably have protested the announcement of the results in the first round. And this time there is another heavy burden on media to expose all this. What's your expectation on this? And generally in terms of coverage for this repeat?
My expectation is for us to understand that this event that is going to happen on the 26th is more than people having ballot papers and casting the ballot papers. In fact, the biggest story from the 26th may not be anything around the ballot boxes, but how state machinery will behave on Kenyans who either have chosen to go and vote or have chosen not to. So that's one of the biggest stories. And while I think Ngeno ably points out the issue of being skeptical on NASA leaders, I would think that the media must be skeptical of political leaders and the pronouncements they make. Today, the president spoke about mtu yoyote akidhubutu ataona chemtamakuni. That was carried as just a statement. Who was the president threatening? His own citizens? What have we seen when the president has made such statements? We've seen the CS repeating and torpedoing the very constitution that Ngeno is now telling us to keep. He has, without due process of law, banned protests, which was illegal, and he has gone ahead to say if a protester, for one reason or another, threw a stone, killing them was like the next best thing that was lawful to do.
I don't think
it is wrong.
I don't think he said that.
And that's why I need us to be skeptical of what our political leaders, both opposition and ruling parties, say, and also what their surrogates, proxies like Ngeno, say, and begin to make it seem that that is what is right. Increasingly, the media must ask deeper questions than the official statement that is going to come out. Remember, when Matiang'i came out and told us that nobody has been killed by the police, but he has been able to tell us that there were people who stoned police. He has that information, but he has zero information about anybody being killed. If we don't get deeper, the media, which is one of the most trusted institutions in the country, because the media in Kenya has done itself well in the circumstances we are in. So we shouldn't bend backwards and not keep our heads high so that we are able to report and call to account our political actors and even civil servants who are behaving like party scions because they've ceased being public servants and now they are behaving largely like political party secretariats. We must be able to differentiate those two. 3, we must be able, and increasingly, it is easy for us to see election offenses on the side of people who will disrupt perhaps others from voting. Election officials who do not avail information readily to any citizen, including the media, are equally committing an election offense. And we must call them for what they are. Because what happened last time, where media houses could not get results in good time from polling centers, were election offenses. But because we glossed over them, we, in fact, were complicit as election officers, committed crimes, which have ended up seeing the election nullified. So we can't afford to be complicit. We must hold everyone to account.
Now to Victor, finally, and one of the things that people mentioned when I asked them what they would like to see done differently in this repeat election is the tallying of results, and they want or expect an independent tally by media houses, perhaps even a partnership. If we did so in presidential presidential debates ahead of August 8th, why can't we do a partnership of the same tallying of results? In your monitoring, and you've been in discussions with many, can we honestly expect this from the media?
Thank you, Mark. One, there was a proposal which was almost supported, but media owners have decided otherwise. So there might not be independent tallying, as it were. But there were, up to last week, Thursday, there were indications that media houses were going to do their independent tallying. But so far, the information I got today is that that idea seems to have been shelved. So there might not be independent tallying by media houses. So likely we'll be getting feeds again from IBC now. Now, obviously, that has its own implications.
Right.
Which, again, people have raised, and there are valid issues people have raised. They needed an independent tallying. Obviously, given that largely our media houses are private enterprises, I wouldn't see how government would come in to support that. Already, government is giving so much money through IBC to support the elections. So unless there is an arrangement between media owners and IBC to part of the budget, which was happening because there was a meeting between UNDP and IBC, but somehow it seems to have been shelved. 2 days to election, I don't see movement towards that. So it won't happen so far from the way I'm seeing things.
Yes.
But two, media are recorders of history. And now, like Dorothy said, whether or not, but there will be an event on 26th, and it must be recorded professionally for that reason. So media has every reason to invest in this event and give Kenyans what it will be. We move away just from reportorial and give ourselves analysis. I would have wished where media invests, and between now and Thursday, to see serious analysis, both constitutionally, giving us scenarios of the likelihoods of what happens if this happens, what are the implications, for example. The issues of the DPP was doing some investigations. What happened? I mean, we don't see some people are being investigated, but what happened with that? We need to see those things. What is the cost of this event on 26th, for example, to all of us as Kenyans, both economic, social, and the rest? We need to see serious analysis of what is the cost. For example, just asking myself, who has ever audited the contract IBC has with its external lawyers, for example, who have lost almost all cases that IBC has been involved in? I mean, is it lack of, so who is looking at some of these issues? I mean, so those, because like we're saying, we are like, if we take this thing lightly, then we go back to Maraga, like he said, casually, you will come here, I'll throw you back. But what is the cost of such? We must ask ourselves tough questions. Like Henry said, we are not so a rich country to be just wasting resources. Who will be held accountable for some of these things that we are looking at? We must profile and see who is where. If it's maybe, for example, Etale or Eric, who is advising who, and what are some of the implications of the advices they are giving, so that we trail. So one day, one time, we'll hold Eric or Philip or myself or Henry that, Victor, you are in charge of this and you cost us this much. We must start asking accountability, because when you just say nation is bad, yet Mark Masai is doing very wonderful work, then those generalities, let's point people in IBC, in NASA, who is this person that we call, who has taken us to where we are? If we can see that such kind of scenarios and recording, then one day, one time, some years back, we'll ask ourselves and say, this year we had this, but it was because of this and this and this. It's not just about having a microphone and announcing, but let's ask, as recorders of history, let's record history, that one day, let's get out informative, interpretative pieces, and that once you listen, because you see most of our Kenyan colleagues are in Al Jazeera, are in CNN, are in BBC, and they're doing fantastic work. We are winning CNN awards as Kenyan journalists. But what happens when we start reporting for our local news? What happens? So those are tough questions that we must ask ourselves. Is it, like Helen says, structural? Is it lack of leadership? Is it a lack of mentorship? Is it guidance? What has happened? Do we still do enough briefing for our reporters before they go to the field? Do we still do serious debriefing? And she has raised those issues. So let's look at holistically. We have trained and overtrained journalists. But who bothers about producers, program controllers in our program? And these are very sub-editors who write most of these headlines we complain about. Cameramen. Who involves them in any training? Cameramen. Nobody cares. So we must look. Then the issue of safety of journalists. That event will happen on 24th. How safe are our
26th,
journalists?
yeah.
On 26, I mean. How safe are our journalists? Have media houses, for example, invested in rapid response mechanisms of how they will deal with if any eventuality happens? Who will take care of your journalists? You want these guys to work for 24 hours or how many hours without eating, without anything, without being paid, without... How? How do we expect quality work from such people? So we must seriously rethink about the safety of our journalists, the support, institutional support we'll give them in the field as they go through about, because obviously, depending on how the environment is, the likelihood of some violence in some areas is there, or just the tension, it might not be violent, but tension. Who takes care of these journalists? So to me, serious plans in our media houses to ensure that we give Kenyans serious information that helps them. Because there's, like we have mentioned, we are thinking about after 26th, what next? Right. I mean, there would be a lot of things. So we need to help, because that will help Kenyans a lot before 26 on making some decisions.
Thank you very much, Victor. And I can see Italia wants to speak. I'll hold you on that point because we're way out of our time here. We're actually almost into Tuesday, just a few days for actually 48 hours, close to 48 hours to the repeat election that Philip Italia says is not going to happen according to them. But thank you so much for your thoughts. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Philip Italia. Thank you, Henry. And thank you, Eric, for that. And for the opinions that you've sent, including Erika Kinyi, who says, Mark Masai, act professionally, sir. I regard you highly, but did you invite yourself to the show? Wacha kierere. Wacha basi. Nimewacha. Asante sana. Thank you to all who make this possible, those who are behind the scenes, who you don't get to see and don't get the credit. I really appreciate you standing in for the long hours. My name is Mark Masai. Have yourself a good night. The work is cut out for us.